we've seen that Raleigh-Durham is one of a very small number of non-hub U.S. cities with a non-stop international flight across the ocean. Very, very small. In fact, we've had that for more than 20 years, so certainly we thank our friends at American Airlines for having that and keeping that with us. The question I want to ask each of our panelists is, what has made that so successful over an extended period of time, recessions and so on, and what can we continue to do as a market and as a state to continue to make it successful? And that'll be the one question we'll start with. So we'll go with each of our speakers. All right.
Well, just to build on what I was saying in my talk, I mean, clearly in that case, it's a situation where that flight has continued to be successful, not simply because of the local market, because of the tremendous connecting support. I saw the aircraft there last night. It's an American 767 with 215 seats, and yet the data shows that it's carrying maybe 60 or 70 passengers per night that are actually going to Heathrow. Everyone else on that flight is connecting beyond Heathrow, for example, to a variety of other destinations. And that just illustrates the importance of the hub structure, as well as, in this case, the alliance relationship. It's American feeding a one world hub operated by British Airways. And that in fact, that flight provides a gateway for people leaving Raleigh-Durham or arriving Raleigh-Durham. And it's, in some respects, it might be more desirable to, I know for myself, to fly the long-haul transatlantic portion first and then connect to perhaps a European destination. So I think the connecting traffic has really helped that flight.
Yeah, I would just add that when you saw Peter's slide where he showed the RDU to Europe O&D traffic, Heathrow was at the top of the list. So it's one of the only ones with at least enough local traffic to be robust, supplemented by the connecting traffic, which I would attribute to two things. One is, of course, the AA-BA relationship, and not only the fact that they're in a partnership for code sharing, but the fact that they are able, on a regulatory basis, to coordinate their schedules and speak jointly to corporate customers and market the flight jointly and revenue share and whatnot. It's also the superior connecting geography of Heathrow, given its location in Europe, which makes it a much more attracting and viable option for a passenger than maybe connecting deeper, further east in the continent, which would limit the attractiveness of maybe going to some other places, either in Western Europe or in India and such. So those factors combined, and that American has the right aircraft to serve it, and your local support have all made that a success. But it is a unique opportunity.
Yeah, I think for the airport, 20 years of service, a tremendous amount of business support for that has really made that successful, and I think we'll continue to make that successful. One thing that American has communicated to us is, the aircraft itself. They're looking at those 767s, upgrading the product, and I think as they upgrade that product and provide a better experience for the customer at the end of the day, that's going to continue to make that flight successful as we keep moving forward. But 20 years of service from that business support is really what's keeping that flying back and forth.
Excellent.
So, it's like real estate, location, location. I would say for air service planning, it's demand, demand, demand. So there's no substitute for high quality demand, a strong corporate base, the population, the revenue. So we can't write that off. That is the most important driver. Airlines will follow the revenue. But having said that, the initial months, even year or two of a startup operation can be the most critical to its success, helping with promoting and selling the flight. So if there is at least a reasonably sufficient level of demand worth contemplating starting that route, some guarantees and assistance with promotion or fallback provisions in some arrangements with the airport or the community can encourage them to take that risk that they wouldn't otherwise take on their own.
So I live in Boston, so I'll use the example of our local success with Massport in the past year, attracting new service from Beijing, from Dubai, from Hong Kong, from Tel Aviv, and there's at least 3 or 4 others. Major new international nonstop services into Boston, and the things that contributed to that, number one, Massport and the route development people at the Airport Authority were very, and continue to be very, very aggressive in pursuing these opportunities. Number two, the Airport Authority itself has been quite, quite involved in providing support in terms of promoting the service, various breaks, rental and fee breaks for the airlines, at least for an initial portion of their operation. And the other thing is heavy, heavy political involvement, ranging from the governor to the senators to the mayor of Boston, all being very committed and involved in making the pursuit of international service a very high priority.
Hey, how are you? Richard Clowes with SAS. One of the things that we used to, well, we call the Raleigh flight, the Raleigh-Heathrow flight, the Glaxo flight, and they fill up the front of the plane. And that makes a huge difference with the revenues, that's equivalent of 6 economy passengers or something like that. So, for us, we don't have a major presence in, say, for example, in your hypothetical route with Paris, but are there other companies in the area that have a large presence, headquarters, for example, in Paris? So I was just wondering how much that attributes to it as well, because, I mean, we all have to be thankful for Glaxo for keeping this Raleigh-Durham flight going, I would say.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, it makes a huge difference, but that should be borne out generally in the O&D traffic statistics we showed you. If that company has company X has a substantial presence or does business in Paris or beyond, within reasonable connecting location beyond Paris, presumably they are traveling there now, just not on a nonstop basis. And that would suggest that the RDU to CDG Charles de Gaulle O&D numbers would be higher, at least closer to Heathrow, if that were the case. But what the airlines can really look at today is the level of traffic that's occurring and the level of traffic they might expect in the future. But that should be borne out in the traffic statistics today we look at from either the booking agencies where we get data or from the DOT statistics that we were looking at. The other thing, of course, is the quality of traffic. As you suggest, a lot of those folks are sitting in the front of the plane. That's absolutely true. My point before, it's not just head count. It is the premium traffic is worth a lot because ultimately revenue's got to cover the cost, not just head count.
So absolutely true. That the level of demand is the primary driver. The economic interaction between the two cities in a city pair, does play a role, and it drives the demand. I mean, the example that, John, that you used on Detroit-Seoul, that flight originally, back when Northwest started, it was driven by the car manufacturing interaction between Detroit and Korea.
Let me build on that a little bit regarding RDU and the market itself. You go back 20 years, absolutely, that company was instrumental in making that flight successful. But if you start looking, we've got 1.5 million people that are traveling out of RDU from an international standpoint. And as we've started to get out and talk to CEOs in the region, what we're finding out is there's lots of company doing a little bit of travel that adds up to a lot of travel. So we're not dependent upon just one company anymore. And since I think about 2008, we've grown by about 28%. And in the CEOs we've talked to, they're looking in the next 3 to 5 years to see some pretty good gains in terms of international traffic. So we have a very diverse portfolio of travelers that are traveling. We're not dependent on any one company as we go forward, which is great in terms of recruiting for international service. So.
Our market, as we said earlier, is one of the fastest growing in the United States. You've seen that, and of course our terminals, both terminals, are either brand new or renovated. What are some things that we should do or not do in terms of trying to get either new domestic service or new international? What are some things we should be wary of, especially some lessons from other markets?
Well, my understanding from talking to the carriers and chatting with Mike this morning is that using the Terminal 2 renovation as an example, it was done very consciously with the financial implications in mind, and an effort was made to enhance the facility while keeping the facility cost competitive. And it's that kind of thinking and that kind of collaboration between the landlord and the tenants that is in the community that's absolutely critical to retaining the service you have and making it attractive so that even the most cross-sensitive carriers like the Frontiers and Allegiants can come in and consider it. I think, I did point to the prospect of a exemption from the fuel tax, which is not necessarily something the community can do locally, but you can influence the debate at the state level. When we're talking about the international example, it is true that carriers can achieve exemption from the sales tax on an international flight. However, they have to use so-called bonded fuel according with customs regulations to do it, which can be an expensive proposition unto itself. So again, when you see Peter's hypothetical with a 2% operating margin, you say, is that my next best opportunity? Something like, I forget exactly the rate, is somewhere on the order of 6%, but a sales tax on fuel can make a big difference. So, keep doing the things you're doing at the local level and think about how policy at the state level can affect your air service levels.
And when an airline is considering a new service to an airport, I mean, what it's really interested in is, can that airport support my operation? Does it have the facilities? So if it's an international service, does it have the customs and immigration facilities? Yes. Does it have adequate capacity? Yes. Does it have adequate gate space? What gates will we get? How would we set up a lounge? Those kinds of issues, all of which I think are, RDU is well positioned for that. The other, and as John just said, the other element is operations, but the other one is costs, right? What's it going to cost me to operate here? How much? What's the implication for the bottom line?
So let me add something about cost. For new terminals, medium-sized hub airports, the category we are across the country, we have the lowest cost in the country. So very competitive from that standpoint. Have customs facilities, John and his team built that, and so we've got capacity from a customs standpoint, so very sensitive from a cost standpoint. And the other thing we need to do is engage our local community. Our community needs to be part of this recruitment. At the end of the day, RDU is not going to buy very many tickets to fly internationally. People sitting in this audience will buy those tickets from the airlines, so we need them to be actively engaged in that recruitment process as well.
Question from Harvey.
Yeah, quick question about the kind of equipment that's flying. Are there any game changers on the horizon that we're going to see in terms of efficiency, distance, et cetera, that would help our competitive position?
Well, I think we're seeing a continuing evolution. I'm from the Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and if you ask people in my department, are there game changers? And what they mean by game changers are things that are still decades away. But in the short term, the game changers are actually smaller, more efficient aircraft, like the 787 is a great example. It allows a lot of airlines to introduce nonstop service on longer haul routes and with a smaller demand base. So that in that respect is a game changer. The A350 is coming into the pipeline as well. I mean, these are all important developments, but they don't happen overnight. I mean, the 787 order book is huge. The delivery timeline is going to be long, but as we've already seen it, as airlines take delivery of that aircraft, they're very quickly, and John had some great examples, putting those aircraft on routes that no one would have thought would be feasible, 20 years ago.
Yeah, those examples, I think the A330neo, so-called new engine option, is going to open up some opportunities, including transatlantic, that wouldn't have been viable otherwise. These are in terms of range and/or fuel efficiency and the right size. There's a lot of talk with will Boeing look at a true 757 replacement, but something that's sufficient for transoceanic operations. Even within the regional jet category, a lot of the newer and larger regional jets are opening up some opportunities, and I know your air service development team looks at those closely as well. So it is a continuing evolution. I think we're seeing kind of the game changers. The game changers are occurring sort of route by route and are opening up some short and long range nonstops that weren't previously viable, and that's something that continually monitor. That's part of what makes the game fun. By the way, I didn't mention even the 737, the MAX that Boeing's coming out with that enters perhaps late 2017, early 2018. One way to think about it: some of the carriers who serve the market will have the luxury of sort of tailoring their aircraft to the market. Others have a single, either one or two fleet types, and they need to tailor the markets they serve to the fleet they have. So now that can happen, change a little bit as variants to those fleets come in over time, but you need to, those are considerations. I do say aircraft evolution will open up more doors.
I should just also add, we've mentioned Boeing, Airbus, but the Bombardier C series, the C-110, C-130 are fuel efficient 110, 130 seat aircraft that might be of particular relevance to an airport like RDU, because right now there's a lot of emphasis on the larger regional jets. I flew down on a CRJ 900 with 76 or 80 seats, but there's really not much in that 100, 120, 130 seat envelope right now, and so I think both Bombardier and Embraer are looking to fill that hole in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Well, those considerations are constant, but airlines try not to make schedule changes constantly. One, the nearer term, you disrupt obviously already booked passengers, but it can be difficult the startup costs, promotion costs, get routes going again, and you try to have a more stable relationship with the community. But right now there are a lot of markets in Latin America that have gone weak. There was many years, the late 90s, there was the recession in Japan and Asia, and I was at United at that time. We had to pull a lot of wide bodies out of there and redeploy even some of them domestically to markets that, although they were suboptimal, they were less suboptimal than they were being on one of the flights to U.S. Japan. So those types of things are really constant, but you try not to make your schedule changes so disruptive that they're hard both for your customer base and your costs of starting up again. But airlines are constantly evaluating the changing geopolitical considerations, economic trends. Markets that we thought were emerging, some of them are now plateauing. Are we growing too fast here and there? And it's constant. Okay.
Well, at this time, again, let's give another warm RTA thank you. Each of our speakers did a great job as a result of the information you've provided us today, both our airport CEO as well as our two keynote speakers. It's going to help the business community make better decisions and the broader community make better decisions about continuing to grow our airport and the air service we have in cooperation with our partners. At this time, I want to again thank our sponsors and all of our leadership team members. You can see them again on your agendas right here. Again, information at your seats, and folks will be outside to speak with you. We always do want to end on time. If it's a transportation group, we need to get doing that, so let's get moving. Thank you very much.